All right. Hey, everybody. Laura Boone here. It was lovely to be at the AI conference last week, and I am thrilled to be able to follow up with the slide deck from the closing presentation as well as a summary of what we talked about. So, what you're going to have here is about a 25 to 28-minute video. It's going to cover exactly what we talked about during the closing session. And then, what I'm also going to do, however, is take that video and I'm going to break it up into four separate parts because we talked about four guiding thoughts or guiding questions. And I'm going to have four separate videos on my website related to each. And I'm going to keep those available for the next 30 days so that you can take a look at them now, or, if you're doing some planning or professional development over break, that you want to make sure that, you get a chance to go back and remember everything we talked about. So the reason that we got together was to talk about AI in the workplace, right? And what kind of cool changes we can make with artificial intelligence. And we had all of these great choice sessions where we were able to decide what we wanted to learn about and who we wanted to learn from. So we began by saying thank you to every single one of these people. I noticed that my screen recorder is cutting off a little bit of the bottom of some of the people's faces, but when I share the deck with you, they will not be cut off. So anyway, we talk about organizational change happens one brain at a time. So each one of these presenters gave you some ideas, one of which probably jumped out to you, and you said, oh my gosh, holy moly, if I could bring that into my workplace, it would be absolutely perfect. And so that magic wand idea that we're going to talk about in a minute is what we're going to work with as we navigate the four guiding questions that we're going to spend time on today. But organizational change happens one brain at a time. I say that because organizational change, changing something in your workplace that's going to impact a specific stakeholder group or possibly everybody, is often treated like a process or a project. But what it really is a cognitive shift on the part of every single person participating in that initiative or impacted by it. So that's why we want to talk about where the brain fits into this process. Now, one of the things that we did talk about was the forgetting curve. I'm kind of moving myself around here. Um, and the forgetting curve was coined in 1885, and research, since then has reinforced the idea that if we don't apply information we learn, we tend to forget about 75% of it within 6 days. So you think about it, the AI conference we were all at was last Monday. So that was 8 days ago. So the fact that we took some time to revisit just even the tiniest bit at the end of the day should have helped you retain some of the information that we talked about. And if you've had a chance to look at it since then, your retention is even greater. And the fact that you're getting this email today, if you take a glance at it, it'll help again to shift that curve. Because if we revisit, review, and apply the information that we've learned, that curve actually shifts. So we remember more for longer or more for longer, which is a great thing and what we want to do because, there's a statement out there that says information without action is simply entertainment. And while we definitely want to entertain people, we also want to go out and make the world a brighter, bigger, better place, which is why we go to professional development conferences in the first place, right? So, back to the idea that organizational change happens one brain at a time. So, here I'm going to share 10 facts about the brain. And the first one is that the brain is hardwired to keep us safe and alive. So that's the brain's only job. It is an organ inside of our head, much like our heart, pumps blood, our lungs help us breathe. The brain is an organ that is simply doing its job to keep us safe, keep us alive. Now we have the brain, the body, and the mind. So we have several different components that go into having us have a successful experience. The brain itself, though, its job is to decide what is safe and what's going to keep us alive, and it usually does that based on the past. And it uses 20% of our energy. So, what the brain does is creates mental models that allow us to conserve some of that energy. And that's where our habits and our biases come from. Now, because the brain really wants to keep us in that safe space, when we engage in behaviors that reinforce the models that the brain has created, it's going to release good chemicals. And that's a very basic explanation, and that's totally okay for our purposes today. And then you'll see later that the brain also releases bad chemicals when we try to shift that behavior. So, as you are looking at taking an organizational change into your workplace, as you're looking at bringing one of these great ideas that you came across today or learned about today into your workplace and impacting other people. Just, it's important for us to know that the brain is doing its job when people are trying to resist bringing anything new or accepting newness. And that's okay, because what it doesn't mean is that we can't do it, right? What it does mean is that the brain can change through the creation of new neural pathways. And that's fantastic. And new neural pathways are carved through three things: choice, repetition, and reinforcement. For us to know, because choice, repetition, and reinforcement are something that we can build into our change management initiatives, right? Fantastic. So, one of the things we can do is keep this visual in mind. This gives a good illustration of creating neural pathways through choice, repetition, and reinforcement. So you can see this entire field. So pretending it's the brain, whatever. You can see that somebody chose to drive through this field in this specific spot. And then somebody must have chosen to do so again, keeping that repetition or creating that repetition and then reinforcing by continuously driving on that same path. So that's the pathway that has been created to go somewhere, and neural pathways are going to operate in a manner that's a little bit similar to that. Okay, so that's the first thing we want to know and we want to be aware of, is that change is absolutely possible. So you have a great idea, you plan it out, you execute correctly, or I should say execute in a way that serves everybody, and it's going to happen. It's going to be great. So there's no um, reason it can't happen in terms of the ability for people to adjust and make shifts. So that's fantastic. Now, what we want to do in order to take our time and make our time work for us here is, there was a job aid that was handed out at the conference, and then it's also on the website. So if you don't have it in your hand, you can print it out. It is at www.structuredshifts.com. It will also be at that QR code if you want to scan it from your phone. But the whole point is that this is a job aid that I use in almost every presentation or training that I do. It has different tools to it, but this one, for our purposes here, is that the right side, which is one side of the paper, says magic wand ideas. In a minute, we're going to talk about your magic wand idea. And then underneath is space for doodles, thoughts, and notes. Now we flip the paper over, and what you see are four quadrants. And the first quadrant is talking about what is that idea that you have, that magic idea that's going to be so amazing and going to work out so well. The second is, who are the people that are impacted by this? Who are the people that are going to benefit? Who are the people that might have some challenges? But who are all the stakeholders that are going to be involved? So your first guiding question or your first guiding thought is, what is the idea that I want to put into play? The second is, who are the people that are going to be impacted, who are going to benefit, and who are maybe not going to feel like they benefit? Like, who are all the stakeholders that are going to be impacted by this decision that you might be bringing into play? The third is to take a moment to think about, what kind of challenges are they going to anticipate having. So you certainly want to think about what the challenges are that you know are going to happen. Also, you want to take some time to be able to to anticipate the challenges and questions that your stakeholders are going to have, because then you can be prepared to, one, see through their lens, understand where they're coming from, and two, be ready to answer that. Because if you can answer to their thoughts and concerns, then you're going to be able to create that sense of psychological safety that is so essential for success in any project. Now, the last part is leadership. How are you as a leader going to navigate this change experience in a way that's strong, confident, assured, even as you're learning on the fly, right? Because so many times we have change initiatives that we're responsible for executing on while we're still learning what's going on ourselves. So we will talk a little bit about how body language, how mirror neurons, and how there are some tools that we can use to support encouraging and supporting a really strong, confident change experience for everybody. And that's why we're leaders, right? That's what we do. So the first thing that we do as we're moving forward here is, what I would love for you to do is take that magic wand idea. Now, the reason I'm calling it a magic wand idea is because what I want you to do is look at it as if somebody waved a magic wand, and the idea that jumped out at you at this conference is one that is going to happen. It all works out. There's no problems associated with it that take it offline. In the end, everything works out, everybody's happy, and everything is just joyful and perfect. So that's your magic wand idea. So if you didn't do it in the live session that we had, take a pause on this video and come back after you've taken a couple minutes to jot down that magic wand idea. You may need to go back to your notes from the conference because it's been a week, but take a minute to just free flow, free form, write down what your magic wand idea is, and then encapsulate it in one sentence and put it in that first quadrant that's at the top left of the paper. So you can hit pause here. I'm going to keep talking though. All right. So now that we've identified our magic wand idea, we get to now plan how we're going to take it to the people that are going to be impacted by it, right? And I've been in change management, change projects, initiatives, mostly technology initiatives, to be honest, since about 2008. My first job was actually putting iPads into a school, my first tech integration job, putting iPads into a school back in 2008 or 9, I think, that didn't even have wireless yet. So we had a lot of work to do. At that time, I actually had this sign in my office. It said, "The only person that likes change is a wet baby." And at the time, I would have stood by it and told you it's absolutely true. And today, I also believe it's true, but I've amended it a little bit to say that my belief now is that the only person or the people that resist or fear change are the ones who don't feel safe. They don't understand if, why, or how this change serves them, or if it's not even intended to serve them, how it serves somebody else without hurting them or taking something away from them that's really working for them right now. And I think that's fair, right? So that's what we're looking at as we are leaders considering initiating some sort of change in our workplace. We know that we will have the early adopters. We will have the people who will jump on board right away. They'll be excited about whatever change it is that you're thinking about making, and they will jump right on board. They won't be a problem. They will be attracted to what we call the bright, shiny of things. They'll love the new features, and they will definitely be the ones who are willing to try everything out for you. Now, sometimes early adopters do have a little bit of a challenge with the pace at which systems move. So they may find that they're a little bit frustrated by the fact that they have this great new tool, but the system in place isn't structured for fast integration, right? If we bring a new tech tool, for example, into the schools, the network isn't always set up. The safety protocols aren't always set up. And sometimes our early adopters get a little bit frustrated with that. Now, on the other hand, we also have the people in the middle, and those are the, sweet spot where we want to keep most people. And then we do have the laggards. We have the people, and I've been worked with many of them who just say, you know what, don't bring that into my classroom because I'm going to use a classroom example. I don't need that tool. I've been teaching for 30 years and this is working just fine for me. Or even I've been teaching for 5 years and this has been working just fine for me. We have to and want to, I should say, recognize that when we're bringing new tools into a classroom or into an environment that's already running itself or running in a way that, the stakeholders feel is successful, when we're bringing in a change, we're not necessarily in their mind bringing in an improvement. We haven't necessarily shared with them or sold them on the idea that this change is a good one. And one of the things I was talking to somebody about the other day is that one, you will often get compliance, but compliance can often mask itself as effective leadership at first blush. And so we really want to know what's happening when the doors close to the classroom. Are we really getting buy-in by everybody on the continuum? And part of how we do that is we look at where are we on this continuum? Now, as leaders, we do get the opportunity to lead initiatives that maybe aren't our favorite or aren't something that we would have chosen to bring into play. So maybe in that case, we're a little bit more in the late majority or the laggards, but we still get the opportunity to lead that initiative. Or perhaps we're early majority. You're going to go back with an idea that you're really excited about. And so you're going to be more likely on the early adopter, early majority side of things. But your stakeholders, your teachers, your students, your parents, your whoever it is you serve may not be. They may be sitting in a little bit later space and not seeing the benefits as quickly as you do. So that's something that's really important just to be aware of, is that people are going to be in different places on the continuum, and you get the opportunity to figure out how to support them in bringing themselves along in a way that's going to work. So for box number two, the top right-hand quadrant, what we want to do is take a look at those stakeholders. Ask ourselves, who are the people that are impacted, affected, and benefited? And then take a minute and next to each group. So for example, if you're a leader of a K-8 school, you might even break it down to kindergarten is going to be not feel great about this, but boy, is eighth grade going to love it. Or maybe you're in a high school and the ELA team is going to think this idea is fantastic. The math team is not. So, you can say positive, negative, or uncertain. And then next to that, so you might even make yourself a little chart. What is it that you can do to help them feel safe and secure? Now, we'll talk to that a little bit more in a few minutes, but that's something where you can start to generate some of your initial ideas. So you can pause here and take a few minutes to work on that. I'm going to keep talking, so just unpause and come back as soon as you're ready. All right. Now, the third part of this is the potential challenges that our stakeholders anticipate may come up. And, we can come up with when we don't know exactly what's going on, we don't know what new things are about. We can come up with some doozies of some ideas that we think might be challenges. So, here in this situation, I'm going to stay in the classroom. We're talking about bringing a new AI initiative into our school. And so, we are going to want to help. First, we're going to want to understand it, but we're going to really want to help Mrs. Smith or Mr. Smith or whoever is the teacher in the classroom understand how bringing this little guy who represents change into the classroom is going to improve the work that they've already been doing in their current situation and structure. So, what's going to be so great that it's going to keep them from saying, you know what, I don't want this, I don't need this. It may be a great idea, but I'm just not going to do it right now. Or you get bare minimum compliance, which is about the same as not getting any buy in at all, right? So that's the first thing we want to think of. And then what we also want to do is look at this through the lens of our stakeholders. So here I have an example of an educator who, one, is very busy, right? They have a lot going on in their life outside of work. It's not ours to know what it is or what's going on, but if I make it up in my mind, I know that they probably have people to feed, plants to water, banks to run to, um, pets to get to the vet. They have people who get sick and they sit in traffic sometimes, right? So these are all things that people are working with every day of their lives, and they're navigating beautifully for the most part, as they also juggle everything that they've got going on at work. So, our educators and our leaders, our admins, almost everybody in the school system, I'd say, is definitely running at pretty full capacity. So, take this educator, for example. They, from the minute they hit the ground running, when they get to work till the end of the day, are usually pretty busy. They have things that they need to do. They may have bus duty, there's announcements, they have to grade, they have meetings, they want to meet with parents, they've got technology to work with, and then they've got to also teach the students and spend time and develop relationship with their students. And so that's one of the places where this, AI technology and these tools can really come into play. And I think a spot where we can really sell our educators on the tools and why they can benefit. Because if we can automate or take off their hands some of those automated manual processes that they use, that they have to do, that are taking time away from students, I think that's one area where we can really do some great work, because teachers always want more face time with their kids and they don't always have as much as they feel like they need. So there are great tools out there. We learned about a lot of them, and maybe that's the approach we start with. Because they're going to say, where does this fit? What are you going to take off my plate that's going to make it so great for you to let this, new thing come into my classroom? What is going to shift? And then the two key questions as well, besides all of that, that we want to make sure that we answer in advance are, one, how am I going to get help when I need it? Because one of the things that we often do, especially with technology integration, is we do a great deal of upfront training. We bring the new resource in, we bring the new tools, we do fairly intensive training. But then after that, we tend to, because of resource limitations, financial and human resource limitations, we tend to then from there often be guiding them to, um, support forums or videos, YouTube, all sorts of places, but they're not getting that one-on-one support that may be what they emotionally need in order to feel safe and confident to move forward and to take the time that they need to really integrate the new tools effectively or the new activity or resource, whatever. The second is they want to know who's going to have their back when a parent calls. So if they bring a new resource or a new tool into the classroom, into the environment, they want to know if a parent calls me, who do I call and who's going to support me? And I think those are fair questions for them to ask, to wonder. And even if they're not saying it out loud, we know from, talking to thousands of teachers over time that that's the questions that they're going to have. All right. So, no pressure there. But in your third quadrant down on the bottom left, we see what are some of the potential challenges, concerns, and then, so that's what you're going to write down. And one of the things that I would love for you to note is that we want to see what their concerns are through their lens. Now, one of the things that sometimes happens is a leader may say, well, that's not a problem, so let's not worry about it. But the reality is, if they don't have an answer to it, or if, an educator or a teacher feels like it's a problem, whether we think it's a problem or not. So we want to make sure that we're answering this question through their lens. And then through our own lens, who are some others that we can collaborate with to source some solutions? Schools, we often operate in a little bit of a silo. And so collaboration with colleagues and networking, is such a wonderful way of getting ideas and easing some of the workload. And then lastly, what do the people who are impacted by this change need to feel safe and in control? It's really important because, and we'll talk about it in a minute, sense of safety and control is really what helps in part to keep the brain feeling safe, open, and receptive. So you can pause here, take a few minutes to answer those questions, come back because I'm going to keep talking. And now we're going to move into the last quadrant, that fourth quadrant that is on the bottom right of the page. It is, what are you as the leader going to be doing to support your team? Because one of the most important things that we can do as leaders is recognize the space that our team members are inhabiting. And that's, physical, mental, emotional, and cognitive. Because what we know is that when we're bringing change into play, that is going to cause stress. It's just a natural part of things. Even when people are excited about a really positive change, there's still stress associated with it. So what we want to do is be very keenly attuned to the signs of stress that may be present in our team members. So the first thing we know that happens when people get stressed is they may start to display some physical symptoms, like shaky hands, upset stomach. And we joked in the live session, and then I've asked this in others, is how many people get the twitchy eye, and people raise hands. Like that's, definitely a sign of stress. At the little bit later level, at a deeper level, we may see that people are grinding their teeth. They've got tense muscles. There's a clenched jaw. And we want to recognize this in ourselves as well. So that's the first sign of stress. And then as we move into the later processing of stress, it's not a later phase. This isn't linear, but these things are all happening. As our team members, if they don't have the information that they feel they need, and they don't have a clearly defined path to what's coming next, they will tend to worry or overthink. We all do it, right? And worrying and overthinking often leads to over discussion. So suddenly this becomes the topic of conversation. Like, what are they doing? When you start to hear the they, then we know we've got some definite work to do. Over discussion can lead to over analysis. Over analysis can lead to catastrophizing. And then we have people in a state of stress that's not supportive to effective change. What we also see is that people may start to withdraw. So formerly really engaged and energetic coworkers are suddenly maybe not quite as participative. So when that happens, you may want to take a look and see if they're a little bit stressed out. And then we've got I'm going to just solve the problem for myself. If people don't feel they're supported, if they don't feel like they have the resource to go to somebody, they are still going to figure out how to solve their problem. We as educators are really, really good at that. We've done it for as long as we can remember, right? And then the last thing you'll see there in the second quadrant or second category is defensive preparations. Now, I jokingly but very seriously share my experience as a teacher where I loved my overhead projector. And it's funny that I've been in tech because I was the last one to, let go of my overhead kicking and screaming. And my defensive preparations were that I always hoarded transparencies because there were never enough transparencies in that cabinet in the front office. So I would get some and I would hoard them. Those are my defensive preparations, my way of solving the problem myself. Okay. And then lastly, as we continue to see stress in the environment, we will have our team members, our staff become forgetful. You may see them starting to avoid each other, avoiding you. There's isolation, there's siloing, right? When a teacher goes back into their classroom, shuts the door, eats at their desk, more often than not, that can really lead to a sense of disconnection, maybe some pessimism. And then over time, we all know that we have staffing shortages. It could lead to people choosing to either leave the school, leave the business, leave the, education field. And then we have staffing shortages through failure to renew. So these are all things that we get to think about as we're looking at initiating change. But that does not mean we don't do it, because the great news is that stress responses can be reduced or eliminated through confirmation of safety and control. So what that means is that as leaders, we can take actions to help people reduce stress and to show them the ways that they are in control of the situation. So I always say this, I've been saying it for years. Make them feel safe, warm, and fuzzy before you ask them to change, do, or learn anything. So when you are working, when I was a coach, I would say, we want to make everybody feel safe, warm, and fuzzy before we teach them anything. When I was working with, phone, tech support, I would say take 2 seconds to make them feel safe, warm, and fuzzy. You're going to get the problem solved a lot faster. And then now with change management, of course, the same thing. But one of the really important concepts in there is that you also, as the leader of the change, want to make sure that you feel safe, warm, and fuzzy before you attempt to change anything. Because, and we're going to talk in a minute about mirror neurons, people are very perceptive. They're going to pick up on your body language, they're going to pick up on everything that's going on around you, in addition to, or even more than, the words that are coming out of your mouth. So, I'm going to show you this activity. Now, this activity is kind of cool. And what the idea is here is that I am giving you 50 pieces of data that I need you to organize. You need to sort it out and you need to put them in order right now. So I'm going to help you out by showing you where number 1 is, and then I'm going to show you where number 50 is. But I'm just going to give you like 30 seconds to get from 1 to 50 as if you're doing a dot to dot puzzle. So I'm going to count to 30 in my head, and during that time, I want you to see how high you can get, going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, and keep going. So I am counting to 30 in my head, starting right now. Okay, that was 30. So what I'd love for you to do is just jot down on your paper what number you got up to. Now, I've had people say 5, I've had people say 12, I've had people say 20. When I hear people say numbers higher than the low to mid teens is when I have shown them the steps and the framework that guides this process. So if I, instead of coming to you and saying, you know what, I have these 50 things that need to be done right now, I need you to put them in order, I had said, hey, I need these all put in order. Here's some guidance. So the page is divided into 4 quadrants. Number 1 is right here, and number 2 is going to be found in this next quadrant. then number 3 is going to be found here, and number 4 is going to be found here. So now we have an understanding of the pattern that is underlying this data. And that makes things a lot easier. So now if we went back through it, what I'd love to do is I'm going to stop talking for a second, but I'd love you to go back through and see how quickly you get to the number that you got to the first time. So I'm going to count to 15 this time. All right, so I counted to 15 and I am going to guess, obviously we're not together right now, so I can't ask you, but that you were able to get to the number that you got to before, or possibly even a little higher, or close to the number that you got to before in half the time. And nothing changed, right? You were looking at the same screen. You were wearing the same shoes. We didn't give you any new tools. We didn't give you anything but information and a sense of structure around how this thing could be done. And so that will serve us as leaders as well to understand that when we provide information, like it talked about in the brain research before, even if it's bad news is better than no news. So if we have limited information and limited tools that we can give to our teams, fantastic, that's better than none. I know that sometimes we want to wait until everything's perfect before we share anything out, but we can also see through this that giving some information can definitely be beneficial. So we can do a good job of impacting the stress response by providing some guidance on how to navigate changes and new experiences. Okay. The next thing in the last part we want to talk about is the power of mirror neurons. Now, the science of it doesn't really matter for purposes of this conversation, but mirror neurons are part of the brain that influence our social interactions. So a mirror neuron is like when you smile at somebody and they smile back, right? It's the brain looking for connections. So mirror neurons are going to fire when we see others experiencing an emotion. So have you ever like walked into a room and the room feels kind of funny? Yeah, it's a lot of that is your body picking up on your brain picking up on what's going on in there through the use of mirror neurons. It also comes into play when you see somebody yawn and then you yawn. Like that happened to me on a virtual call. I'm in a conference call, on video conferencing, and somebody in the meeting yawned, and I'm literally 1,000 miles away from them, and I yawned too. So anyway, so the couple of the things that we can do as leaders to support our teams feeling super confident as we engage in any change is to look at our body language, our facial expressions, and the language and words that we use. So, our body language is going to give off messages greater than anything that we're saying or any words that are coming out of our mouths, as you know. So, you can show really confident body language and you can have a positive, smiling facial expression, and it's going to instill confidence in the people that you are working with. If you come in to a meeting and you're like this, like holding your head, like, I have no idea, which is what this says, that's not going to instill confidence. And that's not us doing our best work to lead people in a way that makes them feel safe, secure, and supported, right? So, our body language and our facial expression. If we want people to sit up and take note, we need to sit up and take note first. If we want people to smile, we need to smile. And then language and words are so very important. Even though they're just a small part of communication, they're powerful. So the brain takes what we say and processes it based on the words. So for example, if I say, you know what, I can't do this, our brain's just gonna up and go, okay, she can't do this. We're not doing it. But if we say, you know what, I'm not going to do this right now, or I choose not to do this, it's different because the brain understands that that's a choice. And so it's empowered. And so it releases different chemical experiences for the same event. So that's kind of cool, right? So if we use really positive languaging, if we use empowering, not necessarily positive, but empowering language, language that gives the feeling and voice of control, so will the people that we support. And that will help the entire community to integrate change a little bit more effectively. And then we can even look at how we move, we breathe, and react. So, in a situation where people are feeling tense, it's really beneficial to slow down our movements, to keep them nice and neutral and safe. And then we can even use the power of the breath to bring the tension down. If somebody's nervous, if somebody's upset, if somebody's frustrated, the way we're breathing can really help them to regulate themselves a little bit. That's a whole nother conversation that could take another hour. And then the way we react or we respond. So if somebody's upset, do we react to their behavior or do we consciously take a step back and choose how we're going to respond? So those are just some of the powerful ways that we as leaders can use mirror neurons. We can either make it where we have a bright sunny day full of rainbows and balloons, or we can use our body language in a way that's going to have us, with tears, spilled coffee, and stubbed toes. Either way, like we can't control everything, but we can certainly influence and impact stress responses by modeling how to navigate change and new experiences. Now, a couple of things I mentioned before was the idea that we want to ensure that you, as well as others, feel warm, safe, and fuzzy. Now, we can't make those, we can't bring a spa day in every day, but what we can do is recognize the benefits of just 5 minutes of movement and 5 minutes of breathing. So I always encourage that we actually calendar refresh breaks into our day. And if you look at my calendar, you'll see that I have them booked in 15-minute blocks where I literally get up and walk away from my desk. And I go do something that is not cognitive, that is not attached to a device, and it is not easy, I will admit. But I do make myself do it because if I figure I got to practice what I preach, right? If I tell people to do it and I'm not doing it, that's not very good. So anyway, 5 minutes of movement has been proven to increase endorphins, reduce blood pressure, and decrease symptoms of anxiety. Dancing even more. So if you want to bust out a dance break, go for it. But what I would suggest and what is so beneficial to model is setting an alarm and every couple of hours, just take a 5-minute break, take a walk. And what'll be really cool is that if the people on your team seeing you doing it, then maybe they'll think to do it as well. And then when you come back, productivity actually increases once you refocus. So there's something really cool there. And then deep breathing is not just relaxing. It's also been proven to affect the heart rate, digestion, to support the immune system. And so that's another thing to think about. I start a lot of meetings with just 3 breaths. And when I was teaching, I would start class that way. And the idea was that it would allow people to really actually enter the room. So you think about it, usually when you're coming into a meeting, whether it's virtual or face to face, you're coming from somewhere and you're going to somewhere. So you have that kind of time that you need to transition into the experience. So we do some deep breathing, and it's going to give people the chance to really center into the room. Now, I know if you're a leader who hasn't been doing this, it feels a little weird at first, but after a bit, even though people don't show it on their faces very often, the feedback is really positive that people enjoy it and appreciate that we do this. Okay. So again, we can impact stress responses by supporting these small steps and by providing reminders to reduce stress. So one of the things that somebody said to me in a training one day was that, you know what, I don't have to set an alarm because my watch tells me when to breathe. And I said, that is fantastic. And I do like the watch does that. But one of the things to be aware of is that your watch doesn't tell you to breathe until you're already at a deficit, right? You're already depleted, and that's why your watch is telling you. So if you set that alarm, you don't end up in that deficit state because you're taking 5 minutes to breathe or 5 minutes to take a quick walk or to do something that's going to nourish and support your body. All right. So there's the fourth quadrant, and this is where you can, again, pause in a second and write down what actions you can take to support and serve during this time. So, how can you as a leader provide guidance, model behavior, support wellness practices? Just jot some bullet points down of how you're going to very intentionally lead this change in a really positive way. So, pause now. I'm going to keep talking. So, now we're getting ready to wrap up. And it's definitely been a little bit more than 28 minutes, but we've got some good information here, and you can come back to it almost any time because we'll have it here for about 30 days. So, organizational change again happens one brain at a time. It is a cognitive process, it is not a project. Because our brains are hardwired to keep us safe and use a lot of energy, the brain is going to do a lot of work to stay fixed where it started. And it's going to do some work to ensure that the status quo remains as is as much as possible. That does not mean we don't bring change in because we know that through choice, repetition, and reinforcement, we're going to be able to make that change. And our understanding of what's happening at the brain level is really nice as a leader because then we understand that it's not personal. It's not necessarily only people being resistant or not wanting to change. Sometimes there is some of that, but there's actually a chemical thing going on we can work with that is either going to support or not support the change that we are trying to make. And again, looking at this image can help us to remember choice, repetition, and reinforcement. I actually have this printed out next to my computer so that I can remember that habits take time to change. So, wrapping up, fighting the forgetting curve. So, we have done that. We had a really nice closing session last week that got us time to do a quick review of what we had talked about throughout the day. And then now this will help as well. Again, I have this entire video that I'm sending this to you in one piece, but I'm also going to piece it out so that you can look at each of the 4 areas separately and have the opportunity to go straight to it. Even though you can timestamp here, it'll just be nice to have it in a separate video with a separate sort of resources. So if you don't apply information you learn, forget it. 75% after 6 days. Again, if we only walk out 25% better, we are still 25% better, and that's pretty stinking awesome. So it's a win-win. We either 25% better or more than 25% better, and either way is really great. So what I would love for you to do, if you haven't already, is share this QR code with a colleague, somebody who wasn't able to be at the training. Um, and that way you get more people around you who are thinking along the same lines, like-minded people affect great change. And I really appreciate having had the opportunity to spend time with the group, spending time in the day and learning much more about AI than I already knew. And I look forward to seeing you all again soon. Take care. Have a great day.